Chapter 3 was about sharing literature with children, so in this video I'm going to show you a couple of types of texts that were mentioned in the chapter, as well as a treasure box where I kept all of my favorite books and books I would use as mentor texts, and lastly I'm going to show you a flannel board using the story Corduroy. The first book I want to show you is an unusual text, or a text with an unusual format, because it has a hole in the page where you could see into the lady's stomach. This book is called There Was an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly. This book is repetitive, so this is the type of book in the text they talked about that 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds really like because it's repetitive so they can read along. There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. Perhaps she'll die. There was an old lady who swallowed a spider that wiggled and jiggled inside her. She swallowed the spider to catch the fly. I don't know why she swallowed the fly. Perhaps she'll die. There was an old lady who swallowed a bird. How absurd to swallow a bird! She swallowed the bird to catch the spider that wiggled and jiggled inside her. There was an old lady who swallowed a cat. Well, fancy that. She swallowed a cat. She swallowed the cat to catch the bird. She swallowed the cat to catch the bird. How absurd to swallow a bird. There was an old lady who swallowed a dog. What? A hog to swallow a dog. She swallowed the dog to catch the cat. Okay, so you get the repetition in this book at this point. The only thing is that in the beginning of this book, it says perhaps she'll die. So I would leave it up to you if you want to read this book to your students or not. They may or may not catch on to it, but you do have better options such as the napping house, which is repetitive on every single page. And it's also got beautiful watercolor illustrations. So this is The Napping House by Audrey Wood, illustrated by Don Wood. So there is a house, a napping house, where everyone is sleeping. And in that house, there is a bed, a cozy bed, in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. And on that bed, there is a granny, a snoring granny on a cozy bed in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. So this might be a better option. So just be careful when you're picking the books that you're reading. Make sure that you've read them ahead of time so you know what they're going to say. Because this is also a repetitive book, but I think it's more appropriate for kids. The next few things I want to show you are examples of text that are at different levels. So this is The Little Red Hen. This book is not cardboard, it's paperback, and the pages are also paper. But the text isn't very hard, as you can see. This is still appropriate for little kids, but you also have options of books like this that are cardboard. They have fewer pages. The pages have a texture on them, and they're more aesthetically pleasing. And little kids can touch this book or put it in their mouth or smooch it, as your chapter says, and it's not going to ruin the book. This book is 32 pages. This book is only 12. So you can see the difference in the two types of text. So when you're picking a book for students, make sure that is developmentally appropriate for them. The book, or the chapter, also talked about making reading more engaging for your students by doing things like reading ahead, so that reading the book ahead of time so that you know how to read it well to your students. And this is an example of a book you could do that with. This book also gives you a great opportunity to be very expressive when you read, which also makes the story engaging. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this book is called Martina the Beautiful Cockroach. It's a Cuban folk tale. Martina Josefina Catalina Cucaracha was a beautiful cockroach. She lived in a cozy street lamp in old Havana with her big, lovable family. Now that Martina was 21 days old, she was ready to give her leg in marriage. The Cucaracha household was crawling with excitement. Every señora in the family had something to offer. Tia Cuca gave her una piñeta, a seashell comb. Mama gave her una mantilla, a lace shawl. But abuela, her Cuban grandmother, gave her un consejo increíble, some shocking advice. So you can see the tab up here at the top. It says honoring speech. So you have an opportunity to show students how to honor the speech of the characters in the book by reading with fluency and expression. So this is Martina the Beautiful Cockroach. The next thing I want to show you is my treasure box. This chapter also talked about keeping your favorite books or books that are your students' favorites or books that you just teach from a lot in a special place. So I got this from Hobby Lobby for probably 10, 15, 20 bucks, something like that. And I kept it open, and inside I would keep my favorite books. You will see that the books are marked. So what I would do is on the front of the book, I would write what I might use it for to teach. I would also tab the pages for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons I might tab the pages of a book is to remind myself what I used it to teach for. So these tabs say honoring speech and sound effects. So let's flip to sound effects. So sound effects meaning this book says put 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 of a little old car. So I was able to know what I used this book to teach for because I had already marked the pages. You can also mark the pages of your book to remind yourself where you want to stop and ask questions. So if you're asking students to make predictions in a text, you might mark the pages because you've read it beforehand, right? So you might want to mark the pages to remind yourself where to stop and ask them what they think is going to happen on the next page. So back to keeping this book in my treasure box. I kept it in the treasure box, and I also would signify that this was an important text to me by putting one of these gold emblems on it. And as you can see, it says Miss Lee's treasure book. So all of my students knew that these books were not kept in the regular library in my classroom, and that I would keep them in a special place up at the front of the classroom, right by my chair, by our large group area, where I would sit to teach them lessons and read to them and do read-alouds. This is a book that I taught about the plant life cycle from. Another one of my favorite books. And another one of my favorite books. Okay, the last thing I want to show you is a flannel board. This is a flannel board for the book Corduroy, which I'm going to read to you in just a second in a different video. The flannel board has the characters from the book Corduroy. Okay, so you can use a flannel board. They are good for introducing characters, and this is just Velcro on the back here. You can also see that in the story, his button is broken, so on the little character here, his button is broken. So I've actually aligned this flannel board by the sequence of the story. So in the beginning of the story, you have Corduroy, that's the first character you're introduced to, and the little girl comes along and sees him and wants him, and basically the mom says no, and then so Corduroy is stuck in this department store, and he goes up the escalator, and he comes into a big room that has a bunch of sofas and stuff. He knocks over a lamp, and then that gets the attention of the guard, and so the story goes. And also in this story, you can go back actually to the beginning, because as you're going from left to right, after you get to this point in the story, it's back to Corduroy doing something, which is the little girl comes and she takes him home and fixes his button and everything like that. So that's one way that you could align the characters on your storyboard. You could also just align them by introducing the characters. So for example, maybe you weren't talking about setting, so maybe you didn't want to have any of those pieces, and you just have Corduroy, the little girl, the mother, and then the guard. And so maybe you're just talking about characters, and that's all you use on your flannel board if you were going to do it like that. Lots of ways to use a flannel board. In the next video, I'm going to read Corduroy to you so you can see how the flannel board would be used.